Hello and welcome to this issue of the Tennessee Concrete Conversations podcast. My guest today is William Paddock with WAP Sustainability, and I'm going to let William introduce himself here in just a minute. We appreciate you listening. Our topic for today is going to be an in-depth conversation about environmental product declarations, or EPDs, why they matter, what has changed recently to make them matter more, and then what you can do to create EPDs for your concrete mixes for your individual ready-mix concrete business. So let's dive in. William, thank you for being here this morning. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So as Alan mentioned, I'm William Paddock. I'm the co-founder and managing director of a company called WAP Sustainability. We're actually based in Chattanooga. I reside in Nashville. So we're Tennessee grown, and our work is we are one of the largest life cycle assessment groups in the United States. So we've been measuring the carbon footprint of things for almost 15 years. And we do a lot of environmental product declarations. I think somebody told me the stat is about 40% of the environmental product declarations in the United States, which include, everything from, furniture to glass to roofing shingles to concrete, asphalt, slag, etc., have WAP's fingerprints on them. And so this has been a primary market for us for a long time. And it's starting to change. It's starting to become a lot more popular and more required. And we're here to help companies and concrete producers navigate that.
And so, William, you and I have known each other now for more than a decade, and we really met in the sustainability space, going all the way back to your days at Lipscomb.
Yeah.
And so we've collaborated on some things over the years. And I came to you, I think 3 years ago, talking about EPDs, and we began to work on a program that would make it easier for our ready-mix members to obtain EPDs when they need them. And we're going to talk a little more specifically about that program in a few minutes. But some things have really changed just recently with legislation. And I want to talk about that today because I think a lot of people in the concrete industry and the construction industry still are not thinking about EPDs, and they still have I believe, the misconception that it's not going to impact their next job. So we have two pieces of legislation really that seem to me have changed that. One is what we often call the Federal Buy Clean Act, and then the more recent what we were calling the Inflation Reduction Act. Both have implications. So talk a little bit about the Federal Buy Clean Act and how that's changing the landscape for federal projects.
Sure. So the history of EPDs go back to, so life cycle, there's two terms to kind of think about. One is life cycle assessment, which is measuring the carbon footprint of something. So this is the first LCA was done in the 70s. Actually by Coca-Cola. And what they were trying to do was understand different packaging for Coca-Cola. So the glass bottle, the aluminum can, and the plastic bottle. And they wanted to understand the impact of that. So LCA, from like an industrial engineering aspect, was sort of birthed. And they, studied the materials and the supply chains and the end-of-life scenarios to try to come up with an understanding of the environmental impacts of those three products. So that was kind of its original idea. And people started to use LCAs in different ways that they could sort of, like any good accounting exercise, you can kind of shape the results to what you want to say. And included in LCAs was a lot of proprietary information about units and supply chains and other things like that. So people didn't really want to share the results. It was usually just an internal exercise. So the question became, how do you share life cycle assessment information, with customers and, in public domain for marketing and other things? And that's why the Environmental Product Declaration was birthed. It was a way to remove proprietary information, but standardize the reporting around carbon and other environmental impacts in a standardized way. That was originally created by a guy in Sweden and then became part of a suite of international standards. And then in the, I call it, early mid-2000s, LEED was really interested in environmental product declarations as they moved beyond, recycled content, how far job sites were away as part of the original LEED v4. And then around sort of that same time, with this idea that if you had carbon footprint information in a consistent way, you could maybe make decisions off of it, compare products, or set limits. California became the first state to implement that sort of idea. They created Buy Clean California, which was the first piece of legislation that set thresholds for materials. Concrete, steel, rebar, and flat glass were the original four categories. And the idea basically said, we won't buy if carbon footprint is above a certain number, and required environmental product declarations. And the policy created stair steps down that, if this year the number was 200, then in 3 years it was 175, and then 150. They wanted to show reductions. That Buy Clean, and that was for anything state money, any state money in California, so universities, Caltrans, other things like that. And that had, an impact in the EPD space. And then other states modeled that policy, like Oregon, Washington, Colorado, others, selecting different materials. Concrete's been a theme in all of them. And then the federal government did the same thing after Biden was elected with a federal Buy Clean, directing GSA to purchase through executive order powers low carbon products. And then in March of this year, I think it was March 30th, the GSA published limits for concrete based on strength and curing time, but basically set a ceiling that says we can only buy concrete that falls below a threshold. And then just recently, the Inflation Reduction Act included a massive amount of money, billions of dollars in directives to have that same sort of behavior catalyzed through the rest of the federal government, but also put some money for EPDs in particular. So it created, money for EPDs and EPD education and EPD development and things like that for, states and other people to implement against these policies.
So what we're seeing today, because of a result, this is a long-term, this has been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not just suddenly appearing. I think in the concrete industry, we haven't been as up to date. So it's not new, but it has new power. So you think about the Federal Buy Clean Act, that doesn't have anything directly to do with commercial projects today. But what's interesting, some might say scary, is there's a table in the Federal Buy Clean Act that sets hard targets for the embodied carbon of concrete mixes that will be utilized on projects that include federal money. So let that sink in for a minute. That's a lot of information, right? But if you look at the table, and we're going to include a link to the GSA report that has this table that's included in the Federal Buy Clean legislation. That'll be on our website tied to this podcast. So you can go look at the table for yourself. But here's what that means. Now this, again, it's not going to apply to every project, but it is going to apply to almost every project that has federal money. And at some point in the not too distant future, that's probably going to include DOT projects. Right now, as far as we know, that's not the case in Tennessee, but it is the case in some other states already. So when you look at that table, you'll see different strength categories for concrete, and it has a target, a written down number for the embodied carbon per yard, and it has, I think, 3 different types of mixes: standard mix, accelerated mixes, and then lightweight concrete. So if you're asked to bid or supply concrete on one of these projects, a federal project, you will have to have an EPD to prove that your mix is less than the targets in this table. That's a whole different ballgame.
It is. It'll probably come through. It'll be directive in the RFP. It's probably going to be administered or asked by whoever the prime contractor is. And just to give an example of that, it would say something like, for a standard mix with a specified compressive strength of 3,500, you have to demonstrate that, that mix has 346 kilograms of carbon dioxide or less. And you have to demonstrate that in the format of an EPD, this type 3 plant-specific, product-specific EPD. And that's what you got to, that's part of the compliance package in order to do that. And that's just federal. For the likes of, Tennessee, military and DOT projects that have, federal money attached to it, TVA examples. We're seeing already projects sort of not in Tennessee, but around port projects. There's a big project in Texas right now, kind of comically with the border wall. One of the first projects the federal government keyed up on was to go after embodied carbon for the wall. So we've seen some producers in South Texas and Arizona scrambling to get EPDs to meet these new modified requirements. But that's the federal side, and then the other story I tell, and this I think is more particular for more impactful for Tennessee and Southeast producers is. COVID redirected a lot of people. They wanted to get out of their markets in New York and Seattle and San Francisco and California that put a lot of restrictions. And so, big employers, big tech are relocating and building offices in markets like Tennessee where people want to move. They don't like the politics in those other places. And so they're coming here. And, these same corporate purchasers have the influence of LEED and their other state policies that they require for their building. So the Amazons and Facebooks and Googles have embodied carbon procurement, and their requirements beat the federal government because now that the federal government has made this normal, they still have to demonstrate some form of leadership. They got to be better than the federal government. So we see that in their specifications and in their contracting documents that this is mandatory and required as well. So if those projects impact producers, or those are projects they want to compete on, we're seeing the larger, more publicly traded companies are including EPD requirements in their procurement language or guidance.
And so what we saw early on with demand for EPDs, particularly for concrete producers, you really only saw that in a project that was most likely pursuing LEED accreditation or something like that. And so it was just a few projects here and there. It wasn't a tidal wave. I think that the federal legislation, again, that doesn't apply to every project, but it's going to dramatically increase the number of projects that will be requiring EPDs. And it's not voluntary on the part of the owner. It's a hard requirement now. So that's new. And as you were just saying, I think that's going to speed up the adoption of EPDs across the commercial sector as all kinds of companies and owners and designers want to do better than the federal targets. So I really think we're entering a new day for EPDs and that this is going to snowball pretty quickly. So what we were trying to do with our program that we started talking about a couple of years ago was position our ready-mix producers in Tennessee to be ready for this brave new world. And if you look back at the history of EPDs in the concrete industry, this used to be a huge and a crazy expensive project for an individual ready-mix producer to undertake. And the good news is when you fast forward to 2022, that has also changed. And the program that we've developed with William is inexpensive. You can do it on a plant by plant basis, so you don't have to do your entire footprint if you have multiple plants. You can do it on a plant by plant basis, and the time to implement, which used to be a year or more because of all the data you had to collect, we can get that down to probably a month, maybe 6 weeks. So I'm excited about this program that we have for our members, and let's talk a little bit about the kind of what has to happen for anybody, including ready-mix producers, to issue an EPD. Mm-hmm. What are the steps?
Perfect. The program we've developed, the state-level concrete EPD program, is really intended to create, almost an easy button for EPDs. We'll kind of talk, I'm sure, at some point about, there's a handful of groups that will provide, LCAs and EPDs for ready-mix producers. Some are more turnkey than others. Some are more software enabled, and some like ours are a little bit more services oriented. And so the steps to the process are, one is you got, back to my kind of Coca-Cola example, is you got to do the math. You need to, the federal requirements and other ISO requirements are, one, that it be plant specific. So you need data from a specific plant, and then it be product specific, which in concrete language means by mix. So I need data from a plant, and I need it for each of the individual mixes that I want to sell. And I got to do math, and the math is done with the life cycle assessment. So I do the math. There's some data that has to be collected from the plant about the different mixes, the percentages, cement, aggregate, water. There's some energy data about the plant, some data about the supply chain, like, where are you getting your cement from? Where how far is your aggregate coming from? Stuff about plant energy and, fuel economy of fleet. So it's all data that plants have, just probably has to be kind of moved around to get into a format that works for doing LCA math. And then we run results, and then those results get turned into tables and put into an EPD format. The math and the EPD go through a verification process in accordance with the ISO standards to sort of check off all the boxes of the federal government, GSA, procurement groups from big tech lead requirements, things like that. And then what you end with is a third-party verified Type 3 product-specific, plant-specific EPD. Those things are valid for 5 years, so you can kind of do it once, set it, and leave it, or you can come back to it. When big things happen, new cement production that happens comes online, and it's significantly lower impact. You replace all your fleet with, and
electric trucks.
Electric trucks, right? And all of a sudden, math is different, and we want to update and show that. But the good news is these things have a pretty long shelf life, so the investment holds over a period of time, and it's only if you want to show something different that you need to kind of go back and edit it. And so that's what we've brought together in this program is the buy cycle for this. For other groups, you may have 2 or 3 people you have to engage with. We just sort of bundled it all up into one price. We manage the process. It's white glove. Call it 4 to 8 weeks to kind of knock one of these out, depending on 2 things: the pace of data exchange, and then review time. Sometimes it takes us a week or 2 to get back together, review things together, make sense of it all. So that adds a couple weeks to the process. But yeah, that's what we're offering and providing, because we know that these concrete producers need to make concrete and get it out and sell concrete. We can handle the EPD piece for them. That's what we do.
Yeah, so I think this is a great solution for ready-mix producers in Tennessee and beyond. And it's everything you need. It's the life cycle analysis piece, which is often a separate vendor. Mm-hmm. It's what's called the program operator piece, which is the person who takes your data after you've collected it and verifies that it's real. And that's a requirement. You have to do that. You can't do it yourself. So that's included. And then there's also the tool to produce your EPD, basically the tool that you need to run your printer or to create PDFs that you can put in your submittals. It's all included. It's all in one. And we've been through the process. This has already been piloted with a couple of our members. So we've gotten, I think, most of the bugs out. And I'm excited about being able to offer this to our TCA members. So we'll continue to keep you updated on this. And we may have William come back. This is a complex issue, and it's going to be increasingly important for the way we do business. The other thing I would just say, kind of to wrap this up, there's a lot of value for ready-mix producers in having EPDs, not just so that you can supply concrete to this particular project, but it becomes your measurement, your yardstick for continuous improvement. I know that some of our producers, some of you already have environmental management systems where you are striving for continuous improvement across your entire business. This is a really key tool for that. So it's not just something we have to do, but I think used correctly, it helps us build better businesses that are prepared to compete in the future that's actually here today in 2022.
There's some interesting learnings that come out of the output, like come out of the math. Again, just like any accounting exercise, you can learn a lot about your business with some good math. Where money's going, where money's not going, where money's not coming from. It's sort of the same deal with carbon, where you have too much or not enough, or you're different. There's insights that can be gleaned, from that. I think there's value there, but then there's also, I think the low tree limb that we're going to walk into is it's becoming a requirement, for most of the concrete plants we talk to at the moment, I mean, I wouldn't say anyone's really hurting for work at the moment. It's probably the opposite problem. So going in and saying, hey, get these EPDs so you can sell more yards isn't really the most attractive thing at the moment. But what we are seeing is that, getting prepared for that. These aren't things that we've had people call and say, hey, I need an EPD. And you say, when do you need it by? I'd be like, well, I got an RFP due tomorrow. Well, that doesn't work. We can't, we're not that quick yet where it can all be implemented that quick. So there's the right amount of forward thinking and preparation for, projects that you know about, know the types of projects that are probably going to have EPD requirements associated with them and just plan accordingly. And what we want to communicate is we're here for you when you need it. When you need an EPD, just know WAP, and then we can kind of plan and support you in whatever way. But at some point, we would bet most concrete plants are going to bid or chase a job that has this as a requirement, just given the breadth of how far EPDs are becoming kind of normal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this legislation is a game changer, and it's going to bring the need for EPDs to a producer's doorstep sooner rather than later. And we're just trying to help industry be prepared for that with this program. So, Will, thank you very much for your time today, and look forward to joining everybody again on our next episode of Tennessee Concrete Conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.